One of the most frequently asked questions that I get is, should I pressure cook it? Should I air crisp it? Should I bake roast it? Should I steam it? How do I cook it? Well, guess what? We're gonna go over all of that and more in this video. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today we're gonna do a little experiment. Now, don't worry, this is a well-tested, delicious recipe, so you're gonna have a good recipe for leg of lamb when we're done. But I thought, let's cook it two different ways and let's see which result would you prefer so that you can choose between air crisping or pressure cooking, okay? So what I have here is two pretty much identical legs of lamb, at least in weight, okay? So the weight for each one is 3.5 pounds. They're a little bit different shaped, which that does come into play, but it's pretty minute, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. So this is a 3.5 pound leg of lamb that I'm using. I have two of them. Obviously, we're doing two different cooking techniques. And you'll notice that there's netting on there. That's the first thing, is leave that on, okay? The leg of lamb is supposed to be like cooked and then sliced as like a nice roast. If you take the netting off, it's gonna kind of flatten out. You're not gonna get a nice sliceable roast. So leave that on. No matter what cooking method you wanna use, you can leave it on, okay? No problem whatsoever. And we're gonna put a rub on it, but first, because of that netting, let's spritz a little bit of oil. It just helps to keep the seasonings where it belongs while we wrap it and let it marinate in the dry rub. So a little bit of olive oil, avocado oil, whatever kind of oil you like. Just do a little spritz. So now I'm gonna mix up and put the rub on the top part of the leg of lamb. What I'm using for my rub, and it's, oh my gosh, so delicious, 2 teaspoons of fine grind sea salt, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of rosemary, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder. Now the rosemary leaves are dried, and what I try to do is crush them up a little bit, okay, before I put them on any meat that I'm doing. And in fact, you can buy crushed rosemary leaves, and I do that sometimes, but these are not. So I just go in there and just crush them up some. Then mix up your rub really well. Now this is enough for one 3.5 pound leg of lamb. So you can see I've got another one there. And we're gonna go all over with this. So just take a nice pinch out and go all over the top. Now on the leg of lamb, you're gonna see a fattier side and a leaner side. We are gonna be cooking with the fatty side up, but it doesn't matter which one you put the rub on first. It makes no difference. But you definitely want to cook with the fatty side up, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Okay, so when you move this around, actually go on the sides here. Get this rub all over. So once you have your leg of lamb completely covered in that rub, then what I like to do is take some plastic wrap. You could use a baggie if you prefer, no problems. And I like to wrap it up and let it sit in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours. I don't always do this with meat, and it's perfectly fine if you just wanna get to cooking it, okay? It's not gonna ruin it or anything. But the flavor is better if you let that dry rub sit on at least 2 hours. And with a roast that size, you could do it overnight. So you could prepare it the night before if you wanted. One really important thing to remember though, is to take it out about an hour before you want to cook it, or you're gonna have to cook it a little bit longer because it's gonna be completely, cold. So I like to take mine out an hour, hour and a half before I cook it, and that works out great. And then just take this up and just wrap it nice and tight. After your lamb has been seasoned for at least 2 hours, I hope that you're gonna do that because it really does make a difference. Then we're ready to set up for either pressure cooking or air crisping, whichever method that you think is gonna work best for your taste. So we're gonna get into that, but let me just talk about what the differences are. So the way that food cooks, usually, most all the time, is from the outside in, okay? So when we're dry roasting something like we're gonna be doing with this lamb over here, just using air crisp, the heat is penetrating the outside and moving towards the inside to cook the meat. That's why an internal temperature of, let's say for lamb, depends on how you like it, but 130, 135 in the very center is what we go for. Then we have that gradient look. So the outside is a little bit more done, and then as you get to the center, it's less done, okay? Now, sous vide cooking is another option, but we're not gonna do that today. And that does things just a little bit different, and you don't have that gradient cooking, okay? It just cooks it at an even temperature all the way through. Now, for this one, the pressure cooking, it's the same principle. We're still heating the superheated water, which actually turns into water vapor, it's steam, is creating the heat on the outside that cooks it from the outside in. But it's super, super hot. And that can sometimes tend to dry out meat that's a little bit leaner, okay? I consider lamb a leaner meat. That's why chicken breasts are kind of hard to pressure cook because the outside gets too rubbery before the inside cooks all the way. Now, if you wanted this well done though, I mean really well done, or let's say you wanted to pull it for, like lamb sandwiches or something. I don't know, I've never eaten lamb that way, but I'm sure you could do it. Then pressure cooking is a really good option because we take the internal temperature to a very well done and it just breaks the meat up, breaks the connective tissue and has it kind of just fall apart, okay? Pressure cooking is great for that. Now what we're gonna do here is kind of an interesting experiment. We're gonna pressure cook and air crisp one of these and we're gonna strictly air crisp the other one because I wanna show you and explain the differences in the texture when we slice them, okay? Because there is a little bit of difference. I've done this both ways because I wanted to see which way worked best for the recipe. I have my opinions, but I'm not going to share those with you until the very end and we taste it and I will tell you the differences that I see. And then you can make the decision what's gonna work best for you. It definitely hands off, pressure cooking is a little bit easier, but surprisingly, I don't think it's any faster, okay? All right, so let's get right to it here. After all that, we're gonna get into it. We're pressure cooking in the right one, air crisping in the left one. 1 cup of water goes into pressure cook. I don't worry about, you can flavor it if you wanted. You could use beer if you wanted. You could do whatever. But for this, I'm just gonna use water. We have to have the water to build the steam to go under pressure, so we have to do that. Then we're gonna put the lamb on a rack. Now, this rack is a little bit different than the reversible rack that comes with a Ninja Foodi. In fact, I don't even know where I got these. They came with one model of Ninja Foodi, I know that. I can't find both of my 6.5 quart reversible racks for some reason. One broke and I can't find, I'm sure I've got another one around here somewhere, but I can't find it. So I wanted them to be identical so that they're sitting identically in the pot. These two are identical and guess what? They are the same height as the reversible rack in the low position. So if you have the reversible rack, that's what you're gonna wanna use because I kind of doubt that you're gonna be doing two at the same time. But if you are, hopefully you have 2 reversible racks and you can use those and low position is what you want. All right, now you might see I have some potatoes here. This is totally optional, it's not part of the recipe, but I found when I did the air crisping of the lamb, I put potatoes on the bottom. Oh my gosh, they were so good. Because the fat from the lamb, because it's not totally lean, there is fat in it. The fat and the juices from the lamb drip down onto the potatoes and cook the potatoes, and it was lovely. So I'm gonna do that today. I'm only gonna use 1 pound of potatoes in each pot. You can fit about 1.5 pounds underneath the rack in the low position, but it can get a little bit tricky. So let me show you. We're gonna do it in both pots just to see in case you decide you wanna pressure cook. I'm gonna put these in too. When you're using the rack, you want it to be nestled on the bottom. So you want the legs of the rack to be on the bottom so that the lamb is far enough away from the crisping lid when we go to crisp it up after pressure cooking. So I'm gonna set these potatoes kind of in the center here. Now I'm not weighing them out. I know this is 2 pounds. I did weigh those just to make sure, but I'm just gonna estimate to put these in 1 pound in each. They have to be in a single layer in order for the rack to fit in as well. That looks good. And then we will set this one right in here. And it does nestle down. Some of them are a little bit bigger. If it's raised up just a tad, don't worry about it. But you don't want like a double layer of potatoes because you don't want your meat to be too close to the heating element. Now these again are the same lamb and they're the same weight, but they are shaped a little bit differently. And that can affect things, but it's so tiny. We're not gonna worry about it for this. So now we can unwrap. We still have our netting on. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, which I know I mentioned earlier in the video, but I want to mention it again because it's that important. Bring your lamb out of the refrigerator at least 30 minutes before you want to cook it. You want it to kind of warm up a little bit for more even cooking. And then when you set it in the pressure cooker, whether you're using pressure cooker or not, find out where the thickest part of your fat cap is. We want the fat cap up. And usually one side will have a little bit more of a fat cap than the other. All right, we'll unwrap this one and get the other Ninja Foodi set up. All right, so let's get these set up. This one is gonna be pressure cook, and I'm using the OL series. This is the 501, which is the 6.5 quart, but you could do the same recipe in the 2-lid model too. You would just switch your lids, okay? Your timings and your temperatures are gonna be exactly the same because we're not doing a steam crisp, we're doing a pressure cook and then an air crisp, which is called tender crisp, okay? All right, so let's get this turned on. On this model, we turn the slider or slide the slider all the way over. It defaults to pressure cook. High is what we want. We're gonna take this to 20 minutes. Make sure your valve is sealed and hit start. Okay, so it's gonna take a little bit of time to heat that water, produce the steam, go under pressure. We're gonna pressure cook for 20 minutes. Then we wanna do a full natural release. Then we will finish up with air crisping, okay? This one's strictly air crisping. We're gonna close the crisping lid. The slider's all the way over to the right as you're looking at it. It defaults to air fry. Now this is where we're gonna go a little bit different, okay? So there's 2 ways you could do this. You can go low temperature for a long period of time and finish with a high heat, or you can start with a high heat and finish it off with lower temperatures. What I'm gonna do is start out at 400 degrees. We're gonna do that for 20 minutes, and then we're gonna bump that heat down, and then we're gonna cook the lamb to the internal temperature that you want it to be. And I'll share where I want it to be in just a minute. If for some reason you start to smell burning string, guess what? Your lamb is a little bit too high in the pot, like mine was. So this didn't happen during the test recipe because I had a different shaped lamb. So every lamb leg's gonna be a little bit different. If this happens to you, do not worry about it. Take the rack out, put the lamb directly on the potatoes, and get back to air frying. When your timer gets down to about 30 seconds, you can go ahead and readjust the temperatures while it's still cooking. And then also make sure that you put your time up to about 1 hour. All right, now you don't even have to open up the lid, which is what I recommend if you're doing this at home. But because we're doing a kind of an experiment here, I'm gonna open up the lid. Keep in mind, every time you open the lid, you let out heat. Heat is what's cooking our food. So a better approach at home would be just change your temperature, dropping it down to 325, putting 60 minutes on the clock, and let it go for a good 30 minutes before you start checking a temperature. But for us, we're gonna do that now. I do recommend always having an instant read thermometer at home that's accurate. This is the best one that I've ever had. I think they renamed it. It used to be the MK4. It's Thermapen. I think it's now called like Thermapen 1. And I'll put a link below the video for this. It's incredible. It's pricey, but it is so worth it because it reads really fast. This is already looking good. All right, so we are somewhere between 69 and 70 degrees. Obviously, we're not nearly where we want to be. So we're just going to keep going, and in about 45 minutes, I will take another temperature, and we'll be getting close to our done range then. Now, let's talk about temperatures of lamb and doneness. I like my lamb medium rare, almost on the rarer side of medium rare, honestly. So I only cook mine to about 130 to 135 at the absolute top. However, the USDA does recommend that you cook lamb to an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. For me, that's well done, okay? Now, if you want to do that, it's perfectly fine. That's what they recommend. You can absolutely do that. Just cook longer. Just cook until the internal temperature comes up to about 140. Then bring your lamb out, let it rest. While it's resting, it will come up in temperature at least 5 degrees. Honestly, I see it come up more like 10 degrees, especially when you have a larger round roast. So I think you could even cook to about 135 and bring it out, and it will come up in temperature. For me, I'm gonna cook this to an internal temperature of about 130. Then we're gonna let it rest for 15 minutes, and it'll come up to hopefully just a little over 135 at the most. All right, so it took about 12.5 minutes for the pressure to release. The pin is down in the back, and there's no more, well, there's a little bit of steam. Definitely recommend opening up the vent here on this model just to make sure that all the steam is out. But the pot says it's depressurized, so you should be able to move the slider over. What I have noticed with this model, though, is sometimes if you don't vent, it'll say open, but you can't move the slider because there is still a little pressure inside the pot. So vent it and then move the slider. All right, we're gonna open this up. Now, it looks terrible right now, obviously, right? We just pressure cooked, it's kind of a mess. Those potatoes look good though down in the bottom. Let's go ahead and get a temperature, and then we're gonna air crisp to get it nice and pretty looking. Now, leg of lamb is kind of difficult to get a precise temperature. So what I recommend is that you go in 2 to 3 different places, okay? Just so that you can see what the different temperatures are. And that's because of the way that it's rolled into this netting. I'm gonna go in here, which I know is really thick. And we are at about 122, 123. That's really good. That's a good temperature to start air crisping. And here we're about 107, 106. And down there I'm about 135. See what I mean? It's all over the place. So, but because our lowest temperature is definitely not, we're not ready to slice this up and serve it. I'm trying to get this balanced a little bit better. This one's not cooperating with me too well. Now, I'm wondering if I'm gonna have the same issue with this one that I did with the other one. And it looks like I'm going to. These are just sitting a little bit higher. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna take the rack out. I'm gonna leave the water in. Not gonna worry about that. And I'm just gonna put the lamb on top of the potatoes. Just lowers it just this little fraction of an inch to get it away from the heating element there. If you have the 8-quart, this probably isn't going to be an issue for you. Now, air crisping. It doesn't matter where the vent is or the valve is for air crisping on this model. The vents are in the lid itself. So now we just hit start, stop, slider all the way over, and we're going up to 400 degrees. And we're gonna go up to 20 minutes, and then at about 12 minutes in, I'm gonna take another temperature and see where we are. What we're doing now is getting that crispiness or getting that fat cap rendered and making the lamb look a little bit prettier and finishing cooking it all at the same time. I said I was gonna wait 45 minutes to check on the lamb, but I can't wait any longer. I want to check on it, so I'm going to open the lid and take a few temperatures and see. You know, it might be time to flip the lamb over too, because if you think about it, we're getting all that direct heat on top and it's sitting close to the bottom. There's not a whole lot circulating around underneath. So it might be a good idea to actually flip it over. Because when I tested the recipe, it was on the rack, which allowed a little bit more airflow. So let's see. Well, we can definitely see that the top is dark, which is beautiful. I mean, that's what we want. Let's take a look at the bottom and let's do a few temperatures. Oh yeah, that can definitely use some browning. So let's go ahead and keep it over there and let's take a temperature. So we are at about, gosh, down here we're about 98 degrees. And over here we're about 110. Okay. No problems. We are going to keep going. We cook to temperature, not time. All right, so it's been about 13 minutes. Let's check a temperature and see. Now, I can see that the fat here, the fat cap's blistering up. It's not going to be nearly as dark as the other one, but I also don't want to overcook this. So let's go ahead and take a temperature. Oh my gosh, I think I already overcooked it. Boy, that happened fast. Yeah, we're at like 140. So this is gonna be the USDA recommended temperature. So hey, you know what? We're gonna roll with it. That's gonna be good. I can show you, hopefully this one turns out like I like it, medium rare. And this one will be more on the well done side. So we're just gonna pull this out. We can leave those potatoes in or bring them out, but I'll leave them in for now. And we'll let this rest for 15 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll start slicing it up. All right, so let's take some temperatures of this one now. Okay, I'm getting between 110 and 120. So we still have a little bit of time left. So probably I'll end up going another 10 minutes or so, and then I'll take another temperature. Meanwhile, let's take the potatoes out of this one, and then I'll get the netting off as well. Now these potatoes are going to be different from the ones that have just been dry roasted. They're going to be cooked more, that's for sure. And they're also not going to be as like crispy crunchy as the other ones. So again, that's like the differences, you know. How do you like things? I mean, they look delicious. They're going to taste delicious. They smell good too. Like these juices smell really good. But they're going to be different. Because this was a wet cooking environment, this was a dry cooking environment. Okay, now let's get this netting off. Easiest way to do that is just with some scissors. Sometimes it actually like kind of sticks in, so just, you know, technically, I wasn't thinking about this, but you know what you could do? If you pressure cook your lamb, like I did, you can take the netting off after you're done pressure cooking before you air crisp. That might actually help it come off a little easier. Now see, we've got kind of a bare bottom underneath here. That wouldn't be what I would want to show guests or anything. And that's because we only air crisp the top. Now I went over temp here and it happened fast, okay? It happened really fast. So what I would recommend, if you want a medium rare lamb leg, I would only pressure cook for about 15 to 17 minutes and do a natural release, which was about 13 minutes. Maybe just do a 10-minute natural release, which would be a delayed release. So 10 minutes doing nothing. And then after 10 minutes is up, move the valve over to vent and vent it out. It's gonna be enough time not to dry out the meat, but not so long that it ends up overcooking like mine did. Because really, I would have preferred to go longer with the crisping at the end, but I couldn't because my lamb was already cooked all the way to temperature. Because it could really go a little bit more, get some more fat render. But it's gonna be fine, and it's USDA recommended, right? We've got that temperature covered now. Okay, we're all done. I was just trying to think about, well, which one took longer? They took about the same amount of time, really. In this instance, it really doesn't matter time-wise which one you go with. Now, the potatoes, they tell a different story. Again, it's preference though, right? But if I saw these two potatoes sitting on a plate, I'm going for these. The shriveled up looking ones, because they're gonna have, I think, more flavor and be just a little crunchy on the outside. But if that's more your style, then pressure cooking, if you want to put potatoes in the bottom, it's probably gonna be better for you. But it really, potatoes are so optional. Let's check the lamb. Now this one has to rest a little bit longer, but this one is ready to carve up. I'm gonna set this over here. This one, I did not overcook according to the temperature. I took it out, it was about between 125 and 130. This one was reading a temperature of what? Like 145 when I took it out. So it'll be interesting to see. Now, when you're slicing lamb, especially when it's cooked well, it's gonna be better if you slice it thin, in my opinion. Now, you can obviously slice it however you want, it's your lamb. But even more importantly is you want to slice it against the grain. And with these guys, you don't really know where the grain is. So what I do, and you can do it however you want, what I do is just trial and error, honestly. So I will take a piece here and take my knife and just sort of shave it off here. And that actually looks good. Oh my gosh. It's cutting nicely. Wow, that looks good. Definitely well done. Now it might be a little less done as we get into the middle. Oh my gosh, this is cutting beautifully. Wow, that looks really good. Let's go ahead. If you like your, I'm hoping this one's medium rare because this is not how I would choose. Oh, but now see, when we get into the center, do you see it's getting a little bit pinker? All right, well that looks good. But taste is everything, right? So let's see. Okay. Well, for me it's a little tough, but I think that's because it's overcooked. That was a thicker piece. Let's see this. I don't like it at all. I'm not a fan of that texture. I gotta be honest. Jeff and I both thought, so now I'm gonna tell you. We air crisped our first leg of lamb, totally, like this one. It was sensational. Like, it was so good. And it was medium rare. That's why I'm hoping this one is. Then we pressure cooked a second one. And it was medium rare. I didn't overcook it that time. I did 15 minutes of pressure cook. And I thought it was a little bit too underdone for you guys, for the majority of people. So that's why I went up on the time. But I think I went up too much. But we thought it was tougher tasting. Now, this is definitely overcooked for me, but I also think it's tougher. So it'll be interesting to see what this one turns out like. So I started carving the exact same way that I started carving this one, but I can tell that I'm not going against the grain. So I'm gonna turn it and do it this way. Yeah, there we go. Now we're against the grain, and I'm just gonna make thin slices. Now this one looks juicier. I mean, I can just tell by looking at it. It still looks overcooked for me, okay, based on how I like it. But it is, oh my gosh, yes. I can tell by looking at this. Hands down, if you wanna make a leg of lamb, skip pressure cooking. Oh, look at that. Oh my gosh, yes, that's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I mean, you could just see it glistening. This is kind of dried up, even though we did a natural release. And it's because of those higher temperatures. And with these kind of cuts, certain cuts will do beautiful in a pressure cooker, but other cuts, you want to stick with the dry roasting method. Oh my gosh, look at this. This is beautiful. And it comes apart easier. Oh my gosh, I can already just tell you. I don't even have to taste it. Oh, it's wonderful. Still overdone for me though. But it's night and day. Now I think it needs a little salt for me, but it's beautiful. Oh my gosh. I'd like to see this about 10 degrees less cooked for me. But that is about cooking to temperature. The struggle here with making this leg of lamb is the temperatures are all over the place depending on where you put the thermometer. So it's really kind of difficult. I would probably go with about 15 minutes of air crisp on 400 and then do the slow roast until it hits about 120, and then I would bring it out 120 in certain areas, because as soon as I tested it at 120, I thought, oh, it's going to be a little bit too under for most people, so let's keep going. And I mean, within 5-10 minutes, it was overcooked. So I would take it out at 120 if you like medium rare, and it's going to be perfect. But I think this is beautiful too. I would call this medium, definitely. All right, let's go ahead and pull these potatoes up, okay? Now, it's not too crispy on the outside. That's fine. But let's put a little salt on them. And let's give them a taste. See which one has better flavor. All right, texture. Pretty good. You can definitely cut it with a fork. They're good though. Buttery. I mean, you know, because they're company potatoes, they're kind of a buttery type of potato. This one's got an interesting, oh wow. This one's quite interesting. The way that it breaks. It's still fork tender, but it's just a different center, like a different texture. Let's see. Clear winner. Oh my gosh, so good. So why would you pick pressure cooking over air crisping if you're trying to make a decision between those two methods? Well, with something like leg of lamb, I wouldn't. I would go with air crisping. I would not choose pressure cooking. That's just me. That's my choice. Unless I was making a well-done lamb that was in juices to shred and put on sandwiches or something, okay? Then pressure cooking's fine because you're gonna keep it kind of submerged in the liquid and it's not gonna lose as much moisture. But you can definitely see just by looking at the meat itself that this one is drier. At least I can. I don't know if the camera catches that, but I can definitely see the difference. Now, between bake roast and air crisp, it's fine. Either way would be fine. You could have put this on bake roast. Those decisions are not big ones to make. Just think the fan goes a little bit faster so you get a little bit more crisping. Possibly this would have been better on bake roast. I don't know. I haven't tested it that way. So if you try bake roast, let me know in the comments for sure. So really, there's no difference between those two. Now, another option would be to steam crisp. That would be kind of cool. You'd have a little bit of the moist environment in the beginning, and then you would go into the dry environment. You would set your time and temperature probably on the lower setting, so 325, for about 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes. Then once that cycle runs out, take your temperature and then use air crisp to finish up if you need to, finish cooking longer. So I guess what I really want to stress the most is it doesn't matter if you pick pressure cook or you pick air crisp, okay? It doesn't really matter. It's about your preference and how you want your food prepared, how you want the end result to be. It also doesn't matter if you pick bake, roast, or air fry under most circumstances, okay? It's still dry heat, it's a dry cooking environment. So pick a function, try it out. If the end result is not exactly what you wanted, try a different function. But most importantly, get in the kitchen and start cooking.